Please be seated. The court is back in session. I hand over the floor to the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia to resume his line of questioning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Expert, we had a complicated discussion before the break, and also due to the usage of non-Khmer terms in your answers, maybe things were not always clear to everybody. So if you allow me to summarize at least one point which seems to be important, and that is the fact that I think we have established that if the majority of the victims that you have worked with suffer from PTSD or from depression, for instance, that doesn't say anything about the people who lived in the decay period as a whole. Is that correct?
I am afraid I do not really get your point. Are you talking about the impacts of the people following the Khmer Rouge period? Can you please rephrase your sentence?
Of course. Is it correct that we have established now that when you were speaking about the majority of the victims that you had worked with, that they were suffering from PTSD or another trauma, that fact doesn't say anything about the percentage of the people who have a trauma and who lived through the decay period as a whole?
Well, for clarification, when we conducted a survey in order to analyze or assess the state of psychological impacts, we use the questionnaire in order to ask whether or not there are symptoms of people who suffered from psychological disorder. According to the result from the response, then some 80% of them they had a psychological problem as a consequence of the Khmer Rouge period. Only a small minority of them who suffered psychological impacts after the Khmer Rouge regime. For example, they may be affected by traumatic events, for example, of robbing or so, but the majority of them suffered psychological disorder during the Khmer Rouge period.
Let me rephrase my question and read something from a report or an article that you also mentioned, an article by Nigel Field. And he is, and I will quote from it, he is saying that the enduring impact of the Khmer Rouge regime on the mental health of Cambodians is well documented. In a recent study examining the mental health of Cambodians, 14.2% of first-generation survivors of the Khmer Rouge were found to currently have post-traumatic stress disorder. And in a separate survey study, 11.5% of Cambodians met the criteria for major depression. Now, if we just briefly focus on those two percentages, 14 and 11, do you agree that that is the percentage that we are dealing with when we're looking at traumas from people who lived through the decay period.
Thank you. If you look at the last few pages, the last section of these reports, you will see the limitation of the study, because there were some constraints in the study. Normally, in any one study, there is some limitation. Some people found 11, 14, 16 or 17, and some found below 10. So I don't think that this poses any issue. But what is an issue is that this figure do not vary from one research to another.
Would it be accurate if I said that 86% of the people who lived through the decay period is not suffering from a post-traumatic stress disorder?
The President, Mr. Expert, please hold on. Mr. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. A while ago, the expert referred to a 2012 study which referred to 14%. That is the presence of post-PSD in the 16-plus age group in Cambodia. That was in 2012. This 14% figure, unless I am wrong, includes people aged from 16 to 35 who did not live under the Khmer Rouge regime. So these figures have to be placed in perspective, because the 14% figure refers to people who lived under the Khmer Rouge regime and others who did not live under the Khmer Rouge regime. So I believe this question, as formulated, would mislead both the parties and the experts. Thank you.
Mr. President, I don't understand the objection. I was just reading from a report cited by the expert himself from Nigel Field. It's a report called Intergenerational Transmission of Trauma Stemming from the Khmer Rouge Regime. And it says the enduring impact of the Khmer Rouge regime on the mental health of Cambodians is well documented. In a recent study examining the mental health of Cambodians, 14.2% of first-generation survivors of the Khmer Rouge were found to currently have post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, my question is a question for clarification. Would that mean that 85.8% of first-generation survivors of the Khmer Rouge regime do not have post-traumatic stress disorder?
We cannot draw that conclusion, because when we talk about trauma, it does not only involve PTSD. There are other diseases as well. What you are saying is the PTSD, but there are other diseases, as I said. There might be depression or anxiety or somatization and other psycho problems as well. So if we conclude that some 85 or so percent did not have PTSD, I do not agree with this.
That I have to say, Mr. Expert, I don't understand. But I also mentioned earlier the depression rate. It says here that in a separate survey study, 11.5% of Cambodians met the criteria for major depression. Now, would that mean that 60% do not, 89.5% do not have major depression?
If you refer solely to depression, that is correct. But if you say it was the result of the traumatic event, then that is not correct, because the consequence of a traumatic event may result in many different diseases, and PTSD is one of them, and depression is also one of them.
If you allow me, let's focus only on PTSD. Do you know how this 14.2% compares to other countries in which conflict has occurred, which has suffered from conflicts or wars? How does, for instance, Cambodia, when it comes to PTSD, compare with Rwanda or with Kosovo or with other countries like that?
According to the study by Professor De Jong, who conducted comparative study of the psychological impacts of post-war countries, his study was done in 2002 or so, and he said the rate of or the prevalence of PTSD accounts for around 80+%, and this was different from the prevalence of the other countries like in Rwanda or in other places, but lower than that of Algeria.
So, are you saying that the PTSD percentage in Cambodia is higher than in other countries?
According to that research, Cambodia was only lower than that in Algeria. That is the only country that the prevalence of people who suffered from traumatic events in Cambodia.
In this same article from Nigel Field, I read the following passage. For many Cambodians, exposure to trauma began well before the beginning of the Khmer Rouge as a result of extensive bombing inside Cambodia by the Americans during the Vietnam War, which resulted in heavy casualties and displacement of civilians. It also continued for years after the formal end of the Khmer Rouge, through pockets of ongoing fighting throughout the country and exposure to trauma in Thai refugee camps. Would you be able, on the basis of your research or your knowledge, to say that the percentage of PTSD in Cambodia is higher because of the pre-decay period and the post-decay period, and the events that happened in those periods?
Well, what was written in that research paper, it was actually conducted by a researcher, and he actually cited from the previous finding of other writer. It was not a finding by Mr. Nigel Field himself. Of course, PTSD could also exist among Cambodian people during the period prior to the decay period because there were bombardment. But it only confined to only certain group of people, and I don't know whether or not the research actually capture the question concerning the period before the decay. But in terms of the research on the people who were affected by the traumatic event during the Khmer Rouge period, actually there were questions for them, even though they did not suffer from psychological disorder, but they were prone or they were vulnerable to PTSD. When, for example, if anything happens, then this person is vulnerable to traumatic experience.
How would you be able to establish that if somebody is suffering from PTSD didn't get that trauma from the period before 75 or the period after 79? Would one be able to establish that at all?
In numerous research that I have encountered, they made use of a questionnaire, and there are questions concerning the traumatic events that people have come across. According to the findings from the researches that I mentioned earlier on, they focus on people who suffered from traumatic events, and those traumatic events were referred to as the event that took place during the Democratic Cambodia period. And they assess the symptom, and these symptoms actually corroborate with the event that took place during the period of Khmer Rouge. It was actually correlated with the events that took place during the Khmer Rouge period.
Yesterday you've been asked questions about the civil parties that have been testifying here the beginning of the week and last week. And it seems that at least the majority of these civil parties who have been testifying are suffering from traumas or from maybe even post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, would it be fair to say that these civil parties, if they were part of the Cambodian population, belong to that 14.2% of the Cambodian population that is suffering from PTSD?
Are you talking about the civil party who came to testify in court last week and earlier this week, that they were part of the 14.2%? Well, I cannot come into a definite conclusion. They may be part of this 14.2%, or they may be not part of this 14.2%.
Let me ask it differently. What does the selection of the 16 civil parties who have been testifying in court say about the suffering of the Cambodian population as a whole in the decay period? Is there any connection, according to your opinion?
The President. Mr. Expert, please hold on. Counsel, you may proceed.
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to object to this question for a simple reason. The choice made by the civil parties was made by the civil party lawyers and lead co-lawyers, so I do not see why the expert should be allowed to speak on this choice and the criteria whereby we made that choice. It is not up to him to express an opinion on that.
Mr. President, if I may quickly reply, I'm trying to establish whether the testimony and the impact statements of the civil parties are in fact representative of suffering in the decay period. We have been listening to 16 civil parties. They have been giving their statements on and been speaking about impact. But my question is this a group representative? Is this group representing the population of DK in 75, 79 as a whole? So I think it's a fair question.
The President. Prosecutor, you may proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. The question may be justified if counsel for Nunchia had personally not made an objection yesterday, an objection which was to find out whether the expert had heard the statements or testimonies of civil parties in the 2 previous weeks, and he stated that he was on a trip. And if he was on a trip, it is possible that he obtained information by other sources. However, the counsel for Nunchia objected yesterday, saying, did the expert really hear what was said during these hearings? The same counsel is trying to use the same approach to obtain information from the expert, which is not logical and rather paradoxical.
The President. The objection by the prosecution is appropriate because the witness, the expert rather, before us did not come to the court or observe the testimony of the statement of suffering of the civil parties that the chamber summoned to testify over the past weeks. Therefore, the expert needs not respond to the last question posed by the defense counsel.
Very well, Mr. President. I will rephrase the question completely. Mr. Expert, would you be able to inform the court what, in your opinion, should have been done in respect of the selection of civil parties in order to present the chamber a representative percentage of people who have suffered during the decay period? In other words, how should the manner of representativeness have been warranted? Which civil parties should have been giving testimony here to this court? would you be able to say something about the manner of the representativeness of the civil parties?
I don't think that I am in the position to say anything about that, particularly in the determination of the criteria for the selection of civil party to testify before this chamber.
Let me try it from another angle. If the percentages are correct, and 14% of the survivors of that period are suffering from PTSD, shouldn't it be, to give a representative selection of the people who lived in that period, there also be civil parties or people who are not suffering from PTSD? In other words, the people belonging to the other 86% of the population in the DK period.
The President. The expert needs not answer to this question because the question is not founded, and the expert has already made it clear that he is not in the position to decide on the criteria for the selection of civil party to testify. And Mr. Coupe, please be reminded that these civil parties who were summoned by the chamber to testify, it was not up to the expert, and it was not chosen from among the Cambodian people in general, but they were selected from the admitted civil party to K002.
That is correct, Your Honor. Another thing, and that is, I think, my last series of questions to you, Mr. Expert. Although you haven't been here while evidence was given by the civil parties on the impact, it could be concluded that quite a few of the civil parties were testifying or are living not in Cambodia but rather in France or the United States. Now, I've seen studies which indicate that the trauma seems to be higher with Cambodians living in the United States or France or Australia. To begin with the latter, is that correct? People who are living, the percentage of people of Cambodian people who are living not in Cambodia, is that percentage higher when it comes to trauma?
If we talk of the number of people comparing to the number of people of Cambodian living overseas, although the percentage may be low, but the number is not the same as those people who lived in Cambodia. The previous study, in fact, focused on the seriousness or the severity of those people who lived overseas, despite their living overseas for 10 to 20 years, and they are continuing. I think my response to you is rather clear now.
But is the fact that somebody is living outside of Cambodia adding to the risk of suffering from, for instance, PTSD or depression?
As I testified before this court yesterday, Cambodian people who lived overseas still suffer from psychological trauma due to a number of factors. Although they enjoy the safety and have full social security support, but they lack in the area of a culture, religion, and their religious practice. They lack in their communication due to language barrier, and their younger generation seems to be distant from them. And these are the factors that may trigger them of the previous events. And the study by this professor actually confirmed that amongst the subjects for his study, they are easy to be triggered by a slight event when they have even just a small fracture with the family members, and that would trigger the trauma. And these are the aspects that they are lacking, and for that reason the trauma continues.
Thank you, Mr. Actually, one last point. Going back to the percentages of 86 versus 14 when it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder. Are you able to opine on factors such as education or wealth or status of people who are suffering from PTSD? In other words, do you have when you were living in 1975, a higher chance to develop PTSD when you were an academic or a teacher or somebody having a higher education rather than being a peasant living in the province?
If you look at the study by the field and relationship of PTSD and other factors, the number of traumatic events under his study and the support that those people received under the Khmer Rouge regime, for instance, if they had an issue and they could seek support, and their economic situation, they are interlinked through PTSD.
In other words, and that will be my final question, to use the terminology of 17 April people and base people, is the chance of development of a PTSD or depression higher or substantially higher with the former? In other words, do 17 April people have a substantially higher chance to develop a disorder, mental disorder, than people who are referred to as base people?
I cannot make that conclusion because I haven't done that study. However, I can say that anyone who suffer more or repeated traumatic events would develop the PTSD, as indicated by natural field. As he indicated, the number of the traumatic events through the PTSD. If the 17 April people experience multiple traumatic events, then they would tend to develop more of the symptoms of the PTSD.
In other words, and now I will really finish. In other words, would you be able to say that the percentage of people with an education or from a higher social class, that they are overrepresented in this 14% percentage of PTSD?
It is difficult for me to make a conclusion on this matter depend on a number of other factors. Sometimes they may not fall into the 14% of PTSD, but they may fall into the depression syndrome, because the depression syndrome is related to the loss. So for those people who were of a higher class or have a higher education, they would fall into the depression group if they actually give more value to the property that they lost. So depression is also part of the trauma. So it means that they fall outside of PTSD, but they still experience other symptoms of a trauma.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
President, thank you. The floor is now given to Kills and Pawns defense to put questions to this expert. You may proceed. Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors, and good afternoon, Mr. Chamsotira, rather, says the counsel. You testified yesterday that you are 45 years old. Can you tell us your date of birth? I was born on the 14th of July 1968. Question: is this your real date of birth? Or it is the one that you change? Answer: in fact, I reduced about 3 years old after the Khmer Rouge regime, so that I avoid being drafted into the army. Thank you. Question: regarding your study at the medical university, we knew that you completed it in 1992. What year did you start it? Answer: it was in 1986. Question: so you studied medicine for 6 years. Thank you for that. During these last 2 days of your testimony, I have heard that you did not engage in the study of the percentage of Cambodian people who suffered traumatic event. Am I correct to say that? Answer: allow me to say that in Cambodia there is no study conducted amongst the entire population regarding a traumatic event, but there is also a population study which is the most reliable than other studies, that is the Sunnis study conducted in 2012. Thank you. Question: in relation to civil parties in case 002, you haven't done any study on the percentage or the rate of the traumatic events occurred upon them. Am I correct? Answer: allow me to say that the TPO where I worked actually conducted interviews with the civil parties for case 002, and the interviews are 250 in number. We actually established a questionnaire to conduct the survey on this traumatic event, and we actually found some of them do have problems with the trauma. Thank you. A question: do you know the total number of civil parties in case 002? Answer: No, I don't know the actual number, but I believe it is almost 4,000. It's between 3,000 to 4,000. Thank you. Question. Does this mean that you only undertook the study of the civil parties in cases 002 up to about 6% based on the figures that you provided? Answer. We actually continue our screening for the study. The study has not yet completed, and that is due to the limited resources that we have. And we only have about 6 to 7 staff working for this project. So we cannot work with all of the 3,000 civil parties, but we will try our best in order to conclude that study. Thank you. Question. You said that you are working with these people. Are you actually providing a counseling service to them or the treatment to them? Answer. It is in a form of psychological intervention. The intervention purpose, and in order to know whether it is effective or not, we have to actually conduct our study with the subjects, that is with those people. Question. I don't really get what you mean by the term intervention. Can you elaborate a little bit further when you talk about the intervention? Is it a kind of a measure in order to reduce their traumatized feeling, something like that? Answer. Intervention means giving assistance to them psychologically. It could be in the form of a individual counseling, group counseling, or medical treatment, or the treatment through testimony. Question. So you are the leader in this intervention measure over there. Are there experts involving in this project besides you? Answer. As I just stated, we actually have a group at TPO to provide psychological health service to victims and civil parties. Actually, we worked in groups. Question. Can you be more specific? Are the groups providing the same service to various people, or different groups provide different services? Answer. In the projects that our organization established, there are about 6 to 7 staff, and we all have expertise in providing counseling and the group counseling and testimonial therapy and medical treatment. So some staff would come to provide the counseling service or a comfort to civil parties who are providing the testimonies before this court. Some will provide a telephone counseling service, or to provide the counseling through a radio talk-in show, call-in show rather. Thank you. Question. Can you tell us the number of people who have come for counseling service from you regarding traumatic event since the start of your organization? Answer: since our opening of the office, I cannot give you the exact figure because each year we received thousands of them. I mean thousands. And we've been operating for about 16 to 17 years. Thank you. Question: do you have any specific statistics, or have you reviewed the review of the rate of people who came for service more than once? I mean, who would come for the second time or for the third time? Answer: they are all new. The number is incremental from one year to the next. For example, in Phnom Penh, we have provided a treatment to about 400 to 500 new people, new patients. And the follow-up service would mean that per year, each of them would meet us 4 to 5 times. So it means there could be 4,000 to 5,000 consultancy sessions each year. Thank you. Question: regarding the impact of the Democratic Cambodia regime, do you have any measure in order to ensure that the impact of the Democratic Cambodia regime can be resolved? Answer: in fact, I replied to the previous council regarding this very question. We actually have a questionnaire on the type of trauma they suffered, and the majority of those people who we have provided intervention described the traumatic events that they experienced under the Khmer Rouge regime. So we look at the symptoms they have today, comparing to the events that they experienced in the past, and we can see the consistent pattern and the relationship between the events that happened and the traumatic experience that they have. Thank you. Allow me to confirm that your questionnaire is related to the Khmer Rouge period and its impact. Is this correct? Answer: yes, it is. Question: do you have other questions besides those impacts under the Khmer Rouge regime? For example, questions which are related to the events that happened prior or post the Khmer Rouge regime period? Answer: yes. It specifies the events that they experienced throughout their life. It could be before or after or during the Democratic Cambodia regime, but mostly the questions are related to the period. Question: can you give us some examples of the questions in that questionnaire? Answer: for example, allow me to read it to you. I haven't brought it with me. Allow me to give an example. Do you experience directly or indirectly of the events, namely the events related to the almost death experience, or the lack of food, lack of shelter, of being arrested, tortured, or face natural disasters or other events, or that you saw dangers or accidents happens to your family members, etc. Thank you. Question. Does this questionnaire aimed only for the events happen within the framework of democratic Cambodia regime, or it's for the entire life? Answer. It is for the lifespan, but then we ask them to specify when that event happen. Is it before or after or during the democratic Cambodia regime? Question. How do you do that? Answer. We then ask, when did that event happen? Question. In terms of percentage, and the events that are described that have impacts, what would be the percentage of those events that happened before, during, or after the democratic Cambodia regime? Answer. I do not factor that in, but we in fact count the events that they experienced. For example, the near-death experience could be up to 90%, and that could cover the period before, during, or after, but I do not factor in the percentage for each specific period. Thank you. Question. Regarding the age range of the subject of your study, do you limit the age range? For example, from this, the number of years of this person and the percentage for this age group? Answer. Yes, we do. In fact, our service is only provided through adult, and we do have an age range, but I cannot recall the exact details of the age range. Question. Based on your study, can you make an assessment that people who are about 50 years old and who are under 50 years old, or those who are below 30 years old, can you recall, or can you recall the percentage of those people that fall within this age group? Answer. I cannot recall that, but the majority of them are above 40 years old. I have to refer to the document in order to give you the specific figure. Question. Do you refer to the majority? What do you mean by that? Answer. It means the percentage of those people who receive the service within this age range group are more than the rest. Question. Can you recall how many age groups have you categorized? Answer. I cannot recall. There could be 4 to 5 age groups. Question. How many years difference between each age group? Answer. It's about 5 years different. Allow me to also add that what I have just described is for those patients that we provide the psychological treatment to them. Thank you. Question. Now, returning to you, you actually reduced your age by about 3 years. So it is likely that you were born in 1965. Is that correct? Answer. I don't really know. I only know the year of the animal, that I should be about 48 years old. So I reduce probably about 3 years of my actual age and not more than that. Thank you. So it means that you rather were you in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge regime? Answer, yes, I was in Cambodia. I was in Kondastang district, Kondastang province. Question. Were your family members also in Cambodia at the time? Answer, yes, they were. Thank you. Question. Did any of your family relatives experience any traumatic event under the Khmer Rouge regime, which is also the subject of your study? Answer. My elder sister passed away at the time due to illness, and I have several other cousins who passed away. Question. In relation to PTSD, sometimes you say that it is a symptom, and sometimes you say it is an illness. Which one of the two? Answer. Thank you for this very good question. I am undertaking a study in order to define a theory of a trauma based on the Cambodian culture. The study has passed its initial stage, and we are moving forward in the study. Currently, I can actually use the term it is a condition of an illness. I do not define it as a weakness yet, but for ordinary Cambodian people, they would say it is an illness or a disease. But for us as a researcher, we have to be more specific in order to define that condition as an illness.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no further question. And Mr. Sutira, I thank you very much for answering my questions. The President, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sutira. Your testimony has come to a conclusion now. So you may be excused now from the courtroom. I take this opportunity to thank Q for taking time of your busy schedule to testify before the court over the last 2 days. I thank you for your efforts in responding to the various questions put by the parties. Your testimony will contribute to ascertaining the truth. I wish you the best of luck and happiness. court officer is now instructed to coordinate with the Waisu unit to arrange the transport of the expert to his home or to any direction he wishes to go. The time is also appropriate for the day adjournment. The chamber adjourns now and resumes tomorrow, Friday the 7th June 2013, starting from 8:30 in the morning. And for tomorrow's hearing, the chamber will resume hearing the testimony of Mr. Sidney Schanberg from New York. And in the afternoon, the chamber will hear the testimony of TCW 665. And this is also the information for the parties, members of the public, and the supporting staff for the arrangement for tomorrow hearing. Security guards are now instructed to bring Mr. Kyew Sampon and Mr. Nuon Chea back to the detention facility and have them returned before 8:30 tomorrow morning. And as for Mr. Nuon Chea, he is to be returned to the holding cell downstairs, where he can follow the proceedings through remote means. The court is now adjourned.